4:17 in the morning, and the parking garage beneath St. Augustine Regional Medical Center smelled the way it always did at that hour, like concrete dust and recycled air, and the faint chemical bite of floor sealant that never quite dried right. Dr. Nathaniel Okafor walked through level B2 with his surgical clogs clicking against the painted concrete, a half-eaten granola bar in one hand and his phone in the other, scrolling through the CT scans his resident had sent 40 minutes ago. AAA, abdominal aortic aneurysm, 6.8 centimeters, expanding. The patient was a 63-year-old retired plumber named Gerald Whitfield, and if Nathaniel did not get scrubbed in within the next 30 minutes, Gerald Whitfield would die on a table while someone else fumbled through the repair. Nathaniel wore grey sweatpants, a faded Howard University hoodie with a small bleach stain near the left cuff, and wire-rimmed glasses that caught the fluorescent light every time he looked up from his phone. He was 51 years old. His beard had gone silver at the chin. He looked by every visible measure like a tired man who had rolled out of bed and driven to a hospital in the middle of the night, which is exactly what he was. What he did not look like, not at 4:17 in the morning in a parking garage, was the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at St. Augustine Regional, a level 1 trauma center that served 4 counties. He did not look like a man who had operated on a sitting U.S. senator 8 months ago, or a man who held an endowed chair at the state medical school, or a man whose hands were insured for more money than most people made in a decade. He looked like a black man in a hoodie walking through a parking garage, and on any other night, that distinction would not have mattered. But Officer Derek Sloan of the Ridgemont Police Department was sitting in his cruiser at the top of the garage ramp, with his window cracked 2 inches, and he had been watching Nathaniel Okafor walk for exactly 11 seconds before he turned on his lights. The blue strobes hit the concrete walls and bounced back in hard pulses. Nathaniel stopped walking. He looked up from the CT scans and squinted into the glare, shielding his eyes with the hand holding the granola bar. The cruiser rolled down the ramp slowly, tires whining on the smooth floor, and came to a stop 8 feet in front of him. Derek Sloan was 39 years old, 6'1", with a buzz cut that showed a small scar above his left ear from a high school wrestling injury he still talked about. He had 11 years on the force. He had 9 citizen complaints in his file, 7 of which involved traffic stops with black or Latino drivers. None of them had resulted in discipline beyond a written counseling memo that his sergeant had signed without reading. Sloan believed in patterns. He believed that his instincts were sharp, finely calibrated instruments that civilian oversight could not appreciate. He believed this the way some people believe in astrology, which is to say, completely and without evidence. He stepped out of the cruiser with his hand resting on the butt of his service weapon. "Sir, I need you to stop right there." "What are you doing in this garage?" Nathaniel lowered his phone slowly and kept both hands visible. He had done this before. Not this exact thing, but variations of it, enough times across enough decades that his body knew the choreography before his mind caught up. Hands visible, voice level. No sudden movements. "Good morning, officer. I work here. I am heading into the hospital." Sloan looked at the hoodie. He looked at the sweatpants. He looked at the surgical clogs, which were teal-colored and scuffed, and something about them did not register with him as belonging to this scene as he understood it. "You work here at 4 in the morning?" "Yes, sir. I was called in for an emergency surgery." Sloan tilted his head. His flashlight came up, not the weapon-mounted one, but the handheld maglite, and he pointed it directly into Nathaniel's face. The beam was white and invasive, and Nathaniel felt his pupils contract painfully. "You got ID on you?" My hospital badge is in my bag. Nathaniel gestured slowly toward the leather messenger bag on his shoulder. May I reach into it? Keep your hands where I can see them. What kind of surgery you do? I am a surgeon, cardiothoracic. Sloan let the flashlight linger on Nathaniel's face for another 3 seconds. Then he swept it down the hoodie, across the sweatpants, over the clogs. He made a sound in his throat, a small exhalation that lived somewhere between skepticism and amusement. Yeah, uh-huh. You got any weapons on you? No, sir. Any drugs? No, officer. I have a granola bar and a phone. I need to get inside. I have a patient waiting. Sloan took 2 steps closer. The space between them shrank to 4 feet. Nathaniel could smell the coffee on Sloan's breath, that burned diner pot coffee smell, and underneath it, something minty. A throat lozenge, maybe. Here is what I think. I think I got a call about suspicious activity in this garage 20 minutes ago. I think I roll up and I find a guy in street clothes walking around a restricted area in the middle of the night, and now he is telling me he is a heart surgeon. You understand how that sounds? There was no call. Nathaniel knew it. Sloan probably knew he knew it. It did not matter. The script had its own momentum now. I understand how it sounds, officer. But it is the truth. If you will let me show you my badge. I said, keep your hands visible. Turn around and put your hands on the wall. Nathaniel looked at him. There was a pause, the kind that holds weight, where one man is deciding how far the other man will go, and whether the answer changes anything about what he has to do next. Officer, I am a physician at this hospital. I am not a threat. I have a patient who will die if I do not get into that operating room in the next 20 minutes. Please, let me show you my credentials. Sloan's jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes, not doubt exactly, but something adjacent to it. A flicker of recognition that this man spoke differently than the script in Sloan's head had predicted. It annoyed him. It annoyed him the way it annoyed him when a suspect did not act afraid, because fear was the lubricant that made his authority work smoothly, and without it, the machinery ground and sparked. I am not going to ask you again. Hands on the wall, now. Nathaniel set the granola bar on the concrete floor. He placed his phone next to it, screen down. He turned around and put his palms flat against the cold cinder block wall. The concrete was rough against his skin. He could feel the vibration of the hospital's ventilation system humming through the wall, a deep mechanical pulse that reminded him, absurdly, of the heartbeat monitors he listened to every day. Sloan patted him down. It was not gentle. Sloan's hands moved with the kind of practiced aggression that turns a procedural search into a statement of dominance. He squeezed Nathaniel's shoulders harder than necessary. He kicked Nathaniel's feet apart, wider than necessary. When he pulled the messenger bag off Nathaniel's shoulder, the strap caught on Nathaniel's glasses and knocked them to the floor. Nathaniel said nothing. Sloan opened the messenger bag and rifled through it. Inside, he found a hospital badge on a retractable lanyard, a stethoscope, a small leather case of surgical loops that cost more than Sloan's monthly rent, a worn copy of a medical journal with post-it flags on 3 pages, and a set of car keys for a Mercedes E-Class. He looked at the badge. The photo showed Nathaniel Okafor, neatly dressed, looking into the camera with the kind of composed patience that comes from sitting for institutional photographs dozens of times. Below the photo it read, Department of Surgery. Below that, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Below that, St. Augustine Regional Medical Center. Sloan stared at the badge for 4 seconds. Then he put it back in the bag. This could be anybody's bag. Could be stolen. Nathaniel, still facing the wall, closed his eyes. Officer, that is my photograph on the badge. You people are always got an answer for everything, don't you? Sloane said it with a flatness that was worse than venom, because venom at least acknowledges the humanity of the thing it strikes at. This was dismissal. This was categorical. You people. Not this person. Not this doctor. A category. Sloane pulled out his handcuffs. The metallic click echoed in the empty garage. I am detaining you until I can verify your identity. You are going to sit in my car until I figure out what is going on here. The cuffs went on too tight. The left one bit into the bone of Nathaniel's wrist, and he winced. Sloane walked him to the cruiser, one hand gripping his elbow, and placed him in the back seat. The back of a police cruiser smells like vinyl cleaner and fear, that particular sour human scent that accumulates over hundreds of transported bodies. Nathaniel sat with his cuffed hands behind his back and felt the seconds ticking inside his chest like a metronome. Gerald Whitfield was on a table upstairs. 6.8 centimeters of thinning arterial wall, ballooning outward, the tissue degrading with every heartbeat. Nathaniel spoke through the partition. Officer, I need you to call the hospital front desk. Extension 0. Ask them to page Dr. Okafor. You will hear my name over the intercom. Sloane was leaning against the hood of his cruiser, writing in his notepad. He did not respond. Officer, a man is dying. Nothing. 8 minutes passed. Nathaniel watched the second hand on the cruiser's dashboard clock and calculated pressures and flow rates and rupture probabilities in his head, because it was the only thing keeping him from screaming. Then a door opened at the far end of the garage. The sound was heavy, industrial, the kind of fire door that takes real weight to push. Footsteps, quick ones, the sharp clack of hard-soled shoes on concrete. Then a voice. Nate? Nate, are you down here? The OR is prepped. Where the hell? Dr. Vanessa Liu, chief surgical resident, rounded the corner at a near jog. She was still tying her scrub cap, and she stopped so suddenly when she saw the cruiser's lights that her shoes squeaked on the floor. Her eyes tracked from the cruiser to Sloane, to the back seat where Nathaniel sat with his hands cuffed behind him. Her face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, and something cold and absolute. What the hell is going on here? That is Dr. Okafor. That is the chief of cardiothoracic surgery. He is supposed to be in OR3 right now. We have a patient crashing. Sloane straightened up from the hood. Ma'am, this is a police matter. Step back. Vanessa Liu did not step back. She was 5'3" and weighed 120 pounds, and she walked toward Derek Sloane like she was going to walk through him. Do you understand what you have done? We have a ruptured AAA upstairs. There is a man bleeding out while you are playing cowboy in a parking garage. Open those cuffs right now. Sloane's hand went to his radio. He keyed it and spoke, his voice carrying the first hairline fracture of uncertainty. Dispatch, this is Unit 414. I need a supervisor at St. Augustine Medical Center, Level B2 parking. I have a situation. While he waited for dispatch to respond, Vanessa already had her phone out. She was not calling the front desk. She was calling Dr. Margaret Chen. Dr. Margaret Chen was the chief of medicine at St. Augustine Regional. She was 62 years old and had held the position for 14 years. She had built the trauma program from a 2-room operation into a regional powerhouse. She sat on the boards of 3 medical foundations. She had a voice like folded steel, quiet, and capable of cutting through anything it touched. She was also, and this mattered in ways that would become clear very shortly, personal friends with the State Attorney General and the chair of the city's Civilian Police Review Board. Margaret Chen answered on the second ring. Her voice was alert. At 4:30 in the morning, the chief of medicine was always alert. Vanessa spoke fast. Dr. Chen, it is Vanessa. There is a police officer in B2 who has Dr. Okafor in handcuffs. The AAA patient is on the table. Nate cannot operate. There was a silence on the line that lasted exactly 1.5 seconds. Say that to me again, Vanessa. Vanessa said it again. Margaret Chen said 4 words. I will be there in 8 minutes. Do not let that officer leave. She hung up, and then she made 2 more calls before she started her car. The first was to Raymond Burris, the hospital's general counsel, who had been a federal prosecutor for 12 years before going private. The second was to Police Chief William Hartwell, whom she had sat next to at a charity dinner 3 weeks prior, and who had given her his personal cell number after she mentioned considering a donation to the department's community outreach fund. She had not made the donation. She would certainly not be making it now. In the parking garage, Sloan had gotten a response from dispatch. His sergeant was en route. He stood by his cruiser and watched Vanessa Liu pace in front of the fire door, and something in the back of his mind, something that lived below his ego and his training and his certainties, began sending up a signal that he could not quite decode. The badge had been real. The photo had matched. The surgical loops in the bag cost $1,000. The resident knew the man's name, knew his schedule, knew his patient. Sloan thought about this, and then he thought about the phrase he had used, "you people." And for one brief and involuntary moment, he saw it from the outside. Saw himself standing in a hospital parking garage, with a surgeon in the back of his car and a patient dying upstairs. And the image was so unflattering that his mind rejected it the way a body rejects a transplant. He clenched his jaw and told himself he had followed procedure. He told himself anyone would have done the same. The thought did not sit right, and so he thought it louder. Inside the cruiser, Nathaniel Okafor sat in silence and listened to the ventilation system hum through the walls. He thought about Gerald Whitfield's aorta. He thought about the clamp he would place at the infrarenal neck. He thought about his daughter, who was 12 and slept with a nightlight and did not yet know that her father had been handcuffed in his own hospital. He hoped she would never know. He suspected she would. 7 minutes later, 4 vehicles arrived in rapid succession. The first was Sergeant Michael Torres, Sloan's direct supervisor, driving a marked cruiser. Torres was 44 and had 20 years on the job. He took one look at the scene, one look at Vanessa Liu's face, and asked Sloan to uncuff the individual immediately. Sloan hesitated. Torres said it again, and this time it was not a request. The second vehicle was Margaret Chen's silver Volvo. She parked diagonally across 2 spaces, which was something she never did, and walked toward the scene with her reading glasses still on her head and her coat unbuttoned. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Officer, I am Dr. Margaret Chen, Chief of Medicine at this hospital. The man you detained is Dr. Nathaniel Okafor, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery, and he has been a member of this medical staff for 16 years. He was called in at 3:45 this morning to perform an emergency repair on a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. Every minute he has spent in your vehicle is a minute closer to a patient's death. Uncuff him now. We will discuss the rest after." Sloan uncuffed him. His hands were clumsy with the key. Nathaniel stood up from the back seat and rubbed his left wrist where the cuff had dug a red line into the skin. He looked at Margaret, and she looked at him, and between them passed something that did not need words, a recognition between 2 people who understood what had just happened and what it would cost. "Go," she said. "Gerald Whitfield is waiting." Nathaniel picked up his glasses from the floor, put them on, took his bag from the hood of the cruiser, and walked through the fire door. He did not look at Sloan. He did not say a word to him. He simply walked, and the door swung shut behind him with a sound like a verdict. He made it to OR3 in 4 minutes. Gerald Whitfield was still alive. The aneurysm had not ruptured fully, but it was leaking, a contained leak that had bought them time they had no right to have. Nathaniel scrubbed in, and his hands were steady because his hands were always steady, and at 5:22 in the morning he placed the graft and stopped the bleeding, and Gerald Whitfield's heart kept beating. While Nathaniel operated, the parking garage became a different kind of operating theatre. The third vehicle to arrive had been Police Chief William Hartwell's unmarked sedan. He was in civilian clothes, a pullover and khakis, and his face had the particular tightness of a man who has been woken from sleep by the worst possible phone call. He did not greet Sloane. He spoke to Torres first. Then he spoke to Margaret Chen. Then he made 3 calls from his cell, pacing a tight line between 2 concrete pillars, and his voice carried fragments that Sloane could hear from 15 feet away. Phrases like civil rights violation and federal referral and how many complaints. The fourth vehicle was a black Suburban with tinted windows. It arrived 18 minutes after the chief. 2 people stepped out. One was Raymond Burris, the hospital's general counsel, carrying a leather folder and wearing the expression of a man who smelled a lawsuit the way a shark smells blood. The other was a woman Sloane did not recognize, a tall woman in a dark pantsuit who introduced herself as Alicia Drummond, deputy counsel for the city's Office of Civil Rights. She had been on Dr. Chen's 3rd call. Sloane stood by his cruiser and watched these people arrive and confer and point at him and take notes, and he began to understand that the architecture of his career was being disassembled in real time, bolt by bolt, in a parking garage that smelled like floor sealant. Chief Hartwell finally approached him. Sloane straightened up. "Chief, I can explain. I responded to suspicious activity. There was no call, Derek." Hartwell's voice was not loud. It was tired. "I checked with dispatch on the way over. There was no suspicious activity call for this location. You were running stationary patrol on the garage ramp. You saw a man walking and you decided he did not belong." Sloane opened his mouth. "Your body camera, is it on?" Sloane's hand went to his chest. The camera was there. The light was blinking. "Yes, sir." "Good." Hartwell took a breath, and then said the words in a tone that was procedural and final. "Officer Sloane, you are suspended without pay effective immediately. Surrender your badge, your service weapon, and your vehicle keys to Sergeant Torres. You will be driven home. Do not contact anyone involved in this incident. Do not speak to the media. You will receive formal notification of an internal affairs investigation by end of business today." Sloane unclipped his badge. It had a weight to it, that piece of metal, a weight that exceeded its few ounces. He had carried it for 11 years. He had shown it to his niece on her 6th birthday and let her hold it, and she had said it was heavy, and he had told her that was because it meant something. He handed it to Torres, along with his weapon and his keys, and Torres took them without looking at him. But then Sloane did something that no one in the garage expected. As Torres led him toward the transport vehicle, Sloane stopped. He turned around. He looked at the fire door that Nathaniel had walked through. "Is the patient going to make it?" Torres paused. Margaret Chen, who was standing 10 feet away, looked at Sloane with an expression that was difficult to categorize. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but a clinical acknowledgement that the question had been asked, and that it had been the first human thing Sloane had said all night. No one answered him. Torres guided him into the car. The door closed. The car pulled away. In the weeks that followed, the machinery did what machinery does. The body camera footage was reviewed by Internal Affairs, the city's Office of Civil Rights, and eventually the FBI's Civil Rights Division, after Raymond Burris filed a federal complaint under Section 242 of Title 18. The footage showed everything: the unfounded stop, the refusal to examine the badge, The phrase "you people." The handcuffs applied with excessive force on a compliant individual. The 8 minutes of silence while a patient lay on a table upstairs. Derek Sloan was terminated from the Ridgemont Police Department 31 days after the incident. He was indicted by a federal grand jury 11 weeks later on 1 count of deprivation of rights under color of law. His 9 prior complaints, previously buried in personnel files that no one audited, were entered into evidence to establish a pattern of conduct. 3 other officers in his precinct were placed on administrative leave pending review of their own complaint histories. The city of Ridgemont settled a civil lawsuit with Dr. Okafor for $6.2 million. The settlement included mandatory department-wide implicit bias training, a restructured complaint review process, and the installation of an independent civilian oversight panel with subpoena power. Chief Hartwell announced the reforms at a press conference and stood at the podium looking like a man swallowing something he could not digest. Gerald Whitfield survived. He spent 11 days in the ICU and another 3 weeks in recovery. On the day he was discharged, he shook Nathaniel Okafor's hand in the hospital lobby and said something that the nurses who were watching could not quite hear. Nathaniel smiled. It was the first time his staff had seen him smile since the incident. Nathaniel Okafor gave one public statement. It was not at a press conference. It was at a medical school commencement 6 months later, where he had been invited to give the keynote address. He did not tell the parking garage story. Everyone in the audience already knew it. Instead, he talked about Gerald Whitfield. He talked about the graft he had placed, the way the synthetic material integrates with living tissue over time, how the body slowly accepts what was once foreign until you cannot tell where the repair ends and the original vessel begins. He talked about how healing is never instantaneous. He said that the word surgery comes from the Greek chirurgia, which means work done by hand. He said that all meaningful work is done by hand, one repair at a time, in the early morning, when no one is watching, and the only thing that matters is whether the next stitch holds. He did not mention Derek Sloan by name. He did not need to. Sloan pleaded guilty to a reduced federal charge and received 14 months in a minimum security facility. After his release, he moved to a town 3 hours north where no one knew his face. He took a job at a building supply warehouse, stacking lumber and operating a forklift. On his 3rd day, a co-worker who had seen the body camera footage on the news recognized him. The co-worker did not say anything. He simply stopped talking to Sloan, and within a week, everyone else had too. Sloan ate lunch alone in his truck in the parking lot, listening to talk radio and chewing a sandwich. And if he thought about a different parking garage and a man in a hoodie and teal clogs, he kept it to himself. One evening, 11 months after his release, Sloan was driving home from the warehouse when he passed a hospital. It was a small county hospital, not like St. Augustine, and its parking garage was open air, just a 2-level structure with a chain across the entrance. He slowed down as he passed it. He looked at the chain. He looked at the fluorescent lights. He pulled over to the shoulder and sat there for a while with the engine running, his hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, gripping it the way you grip something when you are trying to hold yourself in place. Then he put the truck in drive and went home to an apartment that smelled like microwave dinners and silence. And he set his keys on the counter next to a photograph of his niece holding a badge that no longer existed.